So after 3 days, he says, come to my office, let's talk. And he goes, how are you going to coach your team? And I said, you mean like what, offense are we going to run and defense? He goes, no, that stuff doesn't matter. I was like, oh boy, I got a lot of work to do.
Welcome to Grey Matter. I'm Declan Kelly, founder, chairman, and CEO of Consello. I've spent the last 30 plus years advising the CEOs who are leading the world's top companies. If there's one thing I've learned in that time, the best leaders think differently. That wiring, that grey matter, separates the truly exceptional leaders from everyone else. Understanding it is what allows us at Consello to help the best in the world be even better. This podcast exists because the most accomplished leaders agreed to sit down and talk about something they rarely discuss publicly: how their minds actually work. Few people have thought more carefully about how their mind works than 9-time NBA champion Steve Kerr. By his own admission, he was an overthinker with a fierce competitive drive and an inner voice that he spent years fighting against. Before his first season as head coach of the Golden State Warriors, Kerr sat down and did something that leaders don't do enough of. He figured out exactly what he stood for. Since then, he has built one of the greatest dynasties in NBA sporting history and proven that the most powerful operating system that a leader can have is a deep understanding of their own mind. This is Grey Matter.
Steve Kerr, welcome to Grey Matter. Thank you, Declan.
Thank you for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. I will not be contradicted if I say you're the thinking man's basketball player and basketball coach, and you have dedicated so much of your life to doing things the right way. What I'm interested in Grey Matter is how people think. Have you always been conscious of the thought processes that make you like that, or was it organic? What was the background?
It's a great question. I don't think they were conscious, but I think they were subconscious. I think they were being ingrained in me as I grew up. I grew up in a very academic family. I was very quiet, very shy. I imagine I was soaking a lot of things in, but I feel like being a coach, being a professional athlete has maybe helped me crystallize a lot of my thoughts and how I look at the world. And some of that comes from my family and my background. And then some of it comes from all the amazing mentors I've had, coaches, teammates who have helped me along the way.
You've described yourself as an overthinker in some of those interviews and in some of those discussions. Yet you have to be an overthinker in order to be able to be successful and to be present. Do you feel like that has been a huge advantage, or do you feel like that's been a learned skill? Like, how has that manifested itself in your life?
I'm not exactly sure. I definitely overthought things as an athlete. You know, when you're playing, you want to just be fluid and you want to go with the flow. But of course, you have to absorb enormous amounts of information and process things. And I think finding the balance in those things is really the key for not only any athlete, but any human being. The mind-body connection, being able to be the best version of yourself is sort of like, can you take all that wisdom and then just let it flow? You know, and that's the trick. Every athlete wants to find what we call the zone. You know, when you see Steph Curry hit 8 straight threes, he's in the zone. He's not thinking about anything. But there were decades of reps that went into him being able to find that zone, both physical reps and mental ones. And I think that's kind of the beauty of sport and the beauty of getting older and recognizing when you're trying to be great that it does take this unique sort of mind-body connection in order to reach that peak that you're looking for.
One of the things that resonates is this sense of the calm that descends on you when it matters most. Like, for example, in 97 against Utah, when Jordan passed you the ball and it had to go in, you look unbelievably calm. Even on the inside, you may not have been, I'm not sure. But it was never in doubt, right? And you look at that tape, you go, oh my God, this thing is definitely going in before it left your hands. What was it like to be you in those moments, and how did you let that calm come into your whole physical?
I was faking it. I'm not kidding. I was so nervous, but I was far enough along in my career where I had learned the value of just let it fly, you can't overthink anything. You can't think about the repercussions. And And Phil Jackson had been a great mentor for me, teaching our whole team the value of mindfulness and meditation and breathing. He used to take timeouts in crucial situations and just literally lead us in a breathing session. He would just say, everybody, just deep breath, and we'd all take a deep breath. And no other coach was doing that. So I was definitely pretending to be more calm than I was, but I do think that it is part of my personality, something I learned from my dad, to listen and to take everything in and to at least appear calm and approach things in a relatively calm manner. And it wasn't an easy thing for me to do because I also have a competitive rage inside me that for many years I had to fight because I beat myself up inside. My inner voice was not that kind to me. So I feel like it's been a lifetime of trying to sort through all this stuff.
But still, I've read about, the inner game of tennis, which is your Bible.
Yeah.
There is definitely something where you consciously have decided this is the way I'm going to train my mind to behave.
Yeah.
Right? And that is tremendously difficult to do.
Yeah, I mean, the Inner Game of Tennis was a book that a teammate gave me in the middle of my career, early in my career. And it's really a book about connecting the mind and the body. And it was a tennis teacher named Tim Galloway who wrote the book. And the very opening chapter of the book, he says he's watching a tennis player and the guy's talking to himself and he's yelling at himself. What a lousy shot, you idiot. So he said, there must be two selves, right? There's our voice and then there's our unconscious or our body and our mind, however you want to describe it. There's two. We all have two selves. And the book was all about how to blend those two selves to bring this beautiful unity, to bring the best out of yourself. And I literally read the book every season to try to help me understand different ways to blend my mind and my body. And I used to try different tricks during practice or during games that he had suggested, and they were really helpful. And now I give the book to my players. I have 10 of them in my office right now, and I probably give 3 of them to players every single year because I think it's such a powerful message.
How much time do you spend with players on that whole mindfulness part? I mean, obviously they're tremendously talented, but how much of it is about the mind versus the talent?
Yeah. Well, we talk to them quite a bit about mindfulness. We bring in a mindfulness trainer probably once every couple of weeks, and he'll come in and lead them through a mindfulness session. I mimic Phil Jackson every once in a while in a timeout and say, everybody breathe. And we know so much more today. So we have sports psychologists on staff who help the players. And I don't even know which ones they're helping because we keep everything private. But we have people who are ready to teach our players all kinds of things to help them get through the pressure of the game. So I think it's an area of focus, but it's something that I know that others are better equipped to teach my players than I am.
One of the things I've loved reading about is the coaches who have influenced your life, obviously Pop and Phil, and obviously you've played with Michael Jordan and all the greats, but the person who had a profound influence on your life in terms of how you think about it, how you coach, was Pete Carroll.
Mm-hmm.
And I read about how he made you shape your values.
Yeah.
And last night, coincidentally, I was sitting beside Steph at this dinner, and she started talking about your values and repeating the 4 of them back verbatim and talking about how important they were to how he lives his life. Isn't it remarkable that you've managed to put that trail of consciousness together and keep it together over all these years? Tell me about the Pete Carroll episode.
Yeah, so I went to visit Pete in Seattle before I started coaching the Warriors. I had taken the job, but I hadn't started yet. And I just was trying to pick the brains of really smart coaches who I admired. I had watched his teams for years. There was this beautiful competitive joy. And that's what I wanted to achieve. I would watch his teams and I go, that's how I want my team to play. And so I went and watched their practice for like 3 days, and he was so welcoming. And I mean, literally had me in the huddle,
Wow.
I'm on the sidelines. He's like, Steve, come out here. Russell Wilson's the quarterback, and he's like, Steve, get in the huddle. So I'm like literally with 11 other guys, they all have their helmets on, and I'm just listening to the play.
Wow.
Pete was amazing. And so after 3 days, he says, come to my office, let's talk. I said, okay. And I go in and he goes, how are you going to coach your team? And I said, you mean like what offense are we going to run and defense? He goes, no, that stuff doesn't matter. I was like, oh boy, I got a lot of work to do. So he just explained to me that coaching is really about values. And he told me his whole story and how he realized this. And he asked me to start thinking about Pop and Phil and the great teams that I had played for him. He said, when you think about those teams, what do you think about? And I said, just the vibe, the aura that existed when you walked into the building every day. He goes, exactly. He goes, you need to think about what your team is going to feel. And then he explained that if your values are really strong and they come through in everything that you do and the way you carry yourself and the way the team practices, then your values take hold and the team culture takes hold. And it was like, oh my God, this is exactly what happened with Phil, exactly what happened with Pop, Lute Olson in college. These were really strong men who were very unique and authentic and had very different values from one another, but they all shared something unique, which was the ability to get a group of men or boys in Lute Olson's case to connect and to fight for something bigger than themselves. And it really made me think. And so Pete told me, go home and think about your life and your values and what they are. And we kind of went from there.
And they are?
Well, he said, go find 10 of them. Think of your whole life, your parents, your friends. And so I came in with 10 and we narrowed them down to my 4, which are competitiveness, joy, mindfulness, and compassion. And I felt like those were the things that really reflected who I was, how I was raised. For some reason, from the time I was old enough to walk, if I lost, it was like a calamity. I mean, I can't explain why things matter so much, but I mean, literally the Easter egg hunt at 5 years old, if I didn't get the golden egg, like I would throw myself on the ground and pound my fist and cry. I mean, my family members thought I was crazy, and I kind of was, but I can't walk away from that. So competitiveness is part of who I am. And what Pete explained was that these values have to come out in a really authentic manner. And so that means you got to compete every day in practice. You got to keep score. You've got to put stakes on the results, and joy is another one. I just felt like I always played my best when I was joyful, and so we have a lot of joy in our daily rituals and music and family, and we celebrate milestones, and so Pete really taught me how to connect these personal values to the way you operate, and that's how you really get a culture going. I think the best thing that happened to me is that I think Steph Curry really shares the exact values. He and I are very similar in what we think are important and the way we look at life. And the fact that both of us felt strongly about those values, it helped things come alive quickly.
I assume that's also carried through to your decision to continue coaching and his decision to keep playing, because the two of you are symbiotic.
I mean, I'm the luckiest coach alive. This is the finest human being I've ever been around. I mean, I'm not kidding. I mean, the combination of this incredible talent, not just on the basketball court. I mean, he could do anything he wanted. But with this humility, this genuine, authentic desire to be a father and a husband and do good things in the community, and it's also authentic. He's just a brilliant human being, and I realized there's no way I could give up another couple of years of coaching Steph Curry. And if the team was willing to give me those 2 years, I was willing to do it, and I'm so thankful that that's the way it turned out.
Your parents, both academics and teachers, and all of your siblings had academic pursuits. You separated from the herd and decided you were going to do something else. But, when you read all about how your life was, the house was full of people having principled intellectual discussions about what was going on in the world. That cultural zeitgeist that you lived in, it had to have an impact on the way you approached everything, including training, how you lived your life. It must have been fascinating for you to walk into a locker room, full of athletes, people, winning at all costs. And yet you come from an environment which is thoughtful, perhaps quieter, calmer, contemplative. And yet you had to take those two things and put them together.
Yeah, I thought I was the black sheep growing up. I didn't really connect with a lot of this stuff, but I realize now I was absorbing all of it. And I realize now that I'm actually in the family business. Coaching is teaching.
Right.
And so I didn't realize that. And I think it's been a wonderful revelation to understand this full circle. Because when I was playing, I never thought of it that way. I just thought, I'm an athlete. I'm trying to make it in the NBA. I'm trying to compete and win. And this is very different from everything my family is doing. And then it was in the back of my mind that I would want to coach. And once I started coaching, I realized it was my dream job. And especially to coach Steph Curry and the Warriors and in the Bay Area. I mean, I couldn't be luckier, but there's no question that coaching is in my blood, and that all those things I was learning from my family was there all along, even though I wasn't quite aware of it.
And then there's this inner sort of personal resilience, the tragedy of losing your father the way you did, and then your mom deciding to take the family to Carroll, rebuild a life. You've talked very openly and often about this, and you've also been an advocate against gun violence and everything that you've testified to Congress and all these incredible things that nobody else in sport has ever done. But the resilience that you've had to learn, did that come from within, or was it experiential based on what happened to you?
I'm not sure. I do think that growing up overseas, 3 years in Cairo when I was in junior high school, a year in France, living a very international life, watching my father interact with people from all over the world, these scholars speaking different languages, had to have been part of it. I think I gained a really good perspective on how lucky I was to live the life I was living. And so when I lost my dad, I was 18. He was assassinated by Hezbollah in Lebanon. He was the president of the American University. And I got a phone call in my dorm room freshman year and giving me the news. It was, the most shocking, devastating news of my life. And my whole family was just crushed. And so we didn't have any training on how to lose someone. But I do feel like our togetherness growing up, moving around, learning, literally seeing poverty in third world countries, seeing how lucky we were to have each other, to live the lives we were. I think that probably built some resilience without us knowing it. And we were very lucky to have each other. We really leaned on each other after that happened. I'm very proud of my mom. She's 91 and still going strong and still working. She teaches a class at UCLA once a week.
Wow, incredible.
Yeah, and we have a very strong family. Lots of grandkids. My mom now has great grandkids. I have soon to be 3 grandkids. So I'm extremely lucky and fortunate, and that definitely helps build resilience when you know how lucky you've been.
You've also talked a bit about how you had to stake out your own position in the teams you've played in. I think there's an episode one time of you and Jordan going at each other, and you said at the end of that he respected you more because you were willing to stand up. I've often heard you talk about that sometimes in your career, when you were a player, you felt like you were coming off the bench trying to prove your point and you're surrounded by greats. Being willing to play a team sport, but to do different things within the team. That willingness to sort of play these different roles, how critical was that to your success?
I was a role player my entire career. I had great moments. I had some great moments in some key situations, but in 15 years, I just learned this the other day. Somebody brought it up. I started 20 games out of 15 years. I think I played, maybe 1,000 games. I started 20 of them. I was always a role player, a bench player. And that was just, my place was a role player. Now I did have to find different roles on different teams, but it was always as a support player. I was never good enough to be a star player. But I think it's kind of the beauty of basketball is it really does take a 5-man unit working together. The 5 best players don't necessarily make the best team, and I love that. So trying to figure that out as a coach, trying to put the best groups together, it's really challenging and invigorating. And having played for all those different teams and playing with all those great players and great coaches, I was able to see everything. And it definitely helped me become, the coach that I am.
The interesting thing is that I've also heard you talk about and read about, the general management role that you had to play and how different that is than being a coach and how you prefer the role of coach to general management. Is it because it required a different type of skill? Is it because you were more suited for one versus the other? Why did general management not appeal to you?
I like being on the court. I like being in the fight. That when you're a coach, you're literally there for every moment, every practice, every game, every flight. And there are relationships that form within that that are impossible to break. It's like basically being family. And there are moments of pain and moments of friction and, joy and, everything in between. And there's beauty in that. I also was not ready to be a general manager. I think I was about maybe 42 years old. I had only worked in television since my playing days had ended. I was a consultant for the Phoenix Suns for a couple of years and then became the general manager. And I wasn't trained for it, and I made mistakes. But I learned so much from those mistakes that helped me once I became a coach. I also learned that I didn't want to be a general manager. But once I became a coach, I recognized how hard the GM position is and how important the relationship between player, coach, owner, best player, all those key figures had to be in lockstep. And there were mistakes that I made as a GM that I was not going to let happen in my relationships, once I became a coach.
What is it or was it that made that group so special? Not just the talent, but talk a little bit about how you kept it all going the way you did.
Well, the number one thing besides talent, the number one thing you have to have on a winning team is a group of players who understand what the game is about. That basketball is not an individual sport, it's a team sport. And that may not sound profound, but it's much more difficult to make that come alive because players are paid based on individual statistics and numbers, and it's just kind of the way the business works. And so you have to put a group of players together who are really high character players. We had an amazing GM named Bob Myers who put together the rosters, along with his group, his front office. So we had really talented groups, but we had high character guys who understood this concept of the game, that you had to sacrifice, you had to be part of a group, part of something bigger than yourself. And so when I got to the Warriors and saw all these players who were high character, high IQ players, I knew this was an opportunity like only a few coaches had ever had. And consequently, 2 of the coaches who had those opportunities were Phil Jackson and Gregg Popovich. Great talent, great character. Now you've got to make sure it works. And so I knew I could do it, but I knew it was, I had a much easier job than a lot of the coaches in the NBA because we had all the pieces necessary. That first year, I felt like I had imposter syndrome. I was pretending like I knew what I was doing early on, but it clicked right away, and we had this dream season, and we won the championship that first year, and there were all sorts of selfless acts by the players, and it was It was the best year of my life to that point. It was just an absolute dream to be part of and to see the players on stage celebrating the championship. I'll never forget it. And I think from that moment on, I've become a much better coach, but I've been through a lot more, and we've had a lot of knocks and a lot of difficult moments that make you better, but nothing can ever achieve the nirvana that comes from that first experience and seeing it all just kind of happen seamlessly. It was beautiful.
It's also interesting, though, you build this culture, you get the right characters, and then you also have to run, the entire madness that comes with the 4 weeks of being the coach for Team USA. And the rock stars weren't performing so well. And in fact, against Serbia, you were down double digits and it looked like you were going to lose. And then all of a sudden, it all clicked and it all happened. How did you manage all of those personalities and how did you put it out of the fire?
Well, it was helpful that I was an assistant coach for Coach Pop in the Tokyo Olympics in 21. I learned a lot from him just watching how he handled the players. I learned a lot from Coach K, who was kind enough to share a lot of his wisdom before I started the job. One of the things he told me was, because I asked him the same question you just asked me, how do I take all these rock stars? And there's 12 of them. How many real rock stars can be together in a band? 4, if they're real rock stars. Even the Beatles, 2 of them were really the stars, right? And then, Ringo and George were just behind. But, I remember asking Coach K, and he had a great comment. He said, you don't ask them to submerge their egos. You ask them to bring their egos, but you ask them to do so for one goal, and that's to win. And that was really the message. Now it gets harder from there because everyone on the first day says, yeah, we're going to win the gold medal. It gets a lot harder when you're only playing 8 guys and you got 4 rock stars who maybe don't even play that night. But the leadership comes from the players within. In our case, LeBron and Steph, it was really their team. And we constructed the team. Sean Ford, Grant Hill, USA Basketball is an amazing organization. A lot of wisdom. We constructed the team purposely trying to find the right blend of internal leadership and talent. And we had great internal leadership. We had role players who probably went unsung for the most part, who contributed so much beyond points and assists, just keeping this thing going, getting everybody to understand we're gonna win a gold medal. We're all gonna get celebrated. Nobody's gonna care who scored how many points. And it's the only way it can work. And as a coach, you just try to foster all of that each day with the right messaging and the way you treat the players and hope that they treat each other. And ultimately, we had an amazing group.
In your private moments, do you self-reflect on any of this?
There's lots of self-reflection. My dad used to have a great line. I think I've told you this before. He said, this was when I was, 14, 15 years old. He'd say, Steve, you're a modest fellow with plenty to be modest about. I was like, thanks. I think. I wasn't sure what to make of that. My dad was incredibly humble. He was one of the foremost scholars, Medi scholars. He was a professor at UCLA. He spoke fluent Arabic. He was the president of the American University in Beirut. I would watch him with literally people from around the world, heads of state, heads of universities. I'd watch him in conversation. He just would always listen. He would always listen. And I probably just observed without really even knowing it. And I saw him, I saw his humility, and I saw the power in that humility, the power of listening, of connecting with people, empowering them, making them feel good about themselves, the power of coming up with better ideas because you listen and because you solicit ideas, and all of a sudden there's 5, 6 different people chatting about something that may not have come up, and then you reach this sort of zenith of the conversation where you got this idea that would not have materialized otherwise. I took all that in without really knowing it, but I think about it now, and that's how we run our coaches meetings, our team meetings. I want everybody's ideas. I think there's great power in humility. That may sound like an oxymoron because, you know, humility is supposed to be about, maybe not power, but if you recognize the strength that can come from it, you realize, no, we need to do that because we're going to be better as a result. And I don't know, somewhere in my upbringing that was ingrained in me, and I think it's also a matter of playing for 15 years in the NBA and having to guard guys who are way better than me night after night. It was easy to be humble playing in the NBA and feeling overmatched an awful lot. And so I don't know. It's whatever I experienced growing up, it has served me well in this line of work. And I'm lucky to do what I love and to do maybe what I was meant to do.
You've just re-signed with the Warriors for another period, and you're about to go out and do it all over again. And you have other mountains to climb. How do you get back up for it again? Where does it come from? Considering you've won 9 rings, you've won gold medals, you've got nothing left to prove. To go through it all again, start from the bottom and start again and go back all the way up to the top. What's it like?
It's funny you say that. We literally call the season, the NBA season, climbing Everest. At the beginning of the season in our coaches meetings, the first day we go, well, there we go. We're climbing Everest again. That's what it feels like. Not that I've ever done that before, but it is a climb. But I love it. I love what I do. I wake up every morning excited, competition and joy. It's hard to find those things. At the age of 60, I can find joy through my grandkids, through my family, but competition and joy and camaraderie and compassion, all the things that I stand for, that I believe in, those things are so right there when I'm coaching. They're right there. And, we had a lousy season this year. We won 37 games. It was a failure. As soon as I decided I want to coach again, I couldn't wait to get back on the horse and think, we've got to do this better. We got to do. My mind is starting to run again, and the season's like 4 months away. But I'm excited because this is what I do, and it brings me such great stimulation and camaraderie with the group. So why not keep doing it?
Steve, this part of the show is called the Uncharted Walk. Person who's had the most influence on your life.
My dad.
Best piece of advice that you ever got.
Do what I love.
Who gave it to you?
My parents.
Something about you that nobody would know or realize, or something about you that you do or like to do.
I love to cook, and my perfect night, honestly, is to stay home and to cook dinner and have dinner and watch a show with my wife.
When you have played with all these various different players, but if you were to pick a team that you were going to construct around how you think about the game and how you think about sport, would they be made up of 5 people that were like you, or 5 people that were all different random individuals that come from all different walks of life?
Oh, 5 different random individuals. Yeah, a team of 5 of me would be an utter disaster. Everyone would overthink everything.
The 2 coaches, Pop and Phil, if you were to describe the 2 of them with 1 word each.
Authentic, actually for both.
Is there anything about you that you've decided that you wanted to unlearn? That when you were sort of playing the game and then coaching, and you said, you know what, I used to do it that way, but now I do it the other way, and I'm glad I changed my mind.
I think I've had to unlearn the tendency to beat myself up after failure. It took me a long, long time, like literally in the last couple of years. I finally realized I'm going to lose. I'm going to make poor decisions that I regret later. But losing sleep over them and beating myself up is not at all productive. Actually, I shouldn't even say I'm trying to unlearn them. I think I have unlearned them, and that's been very helpful.
It's been a great pleasure.
Thank
You're a
you.
great man.
Me-
Thank you so much,
Thank
Steve.
you.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.